everybody. So today I'm here to talk to you about a very sad thing, a disappointing film, and it's not Batman versus Super Ant-Man, though that was disappointing. No, the film that really disappointed me this week is actually My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2. The reason why this was a disappointment for me was because I love the original. It's one of my favorite comedies of all time. And that might sound crazy, but it really is. I just think it does what's so hard to do about romantic comedies. And you know, I love romantic comedies. I did a whole defense of the romantic comedy that I can put in the description section. You should check out one of my very earliest videos, and one of the ones I talk about in there is My Big Fat Greek Wedding, because what it does so well is it focuses on one character, and Tula, and she is kind of embracing becoming an independent woman. And so you see her journey, and it's all sort of peppered in with her crazy family. And of course she gets engaged to this man, Ian, who's not Greek. Her family doesn't like that. And there's all sort of the hubbub of planning a wedding. So now all these years later, it was like, that was in 2002. So almost 15 years later, we get our sequel for My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And the biggest problem that the sequel has is that it's not focused on one person like the original was. You have lots of different stories that they're trying to tell. You have, in one movie, you have Tula and her marriage getting stale. You have them trying to go on a date, but then you also have her mother, and she didn't get proposed to, and then they find out they weren't actually married, her and her father, and then her father wants to find out if he's related to Alexander the Great, and then her daughter has two different plot lines. One, that she was trying to decide what school to go to, and then another plot line of going to prom. And then there's all these other little ones thrown in there. The brother comes to visit from her uncle. The father's brother comes to visit from Greece, and they have bad ties. It just goes on and on and on the list. They even give a storyline to the grandma character, who was always just sort of in the neighbor's yard and stuff. They get a story for her too, and it just becomes really sitcom-y because none of these stories are actively developed well enough, instead of being actually really funny because you're attached to this character who's having all of these kind of crazy things happen to her. Because when a comedy is really good, it takes situations that we have in real life and then it makes it sort of a heightened reality. And so, like, we all have loud and obnoxious families. But this is obviously a heightened version of a loud, obnoxious family. Because we don't get enough time with the characters, it's a ridiculous notion of family, and they just take it way too far. And like, for instance, at Paris's, the daughter, who's named Paris, at her school, she goes to a college fair, and it'd be one thing if, like, the mother was sort of hovering. That could be funny, like in the Goldbergs, that could be really funny. But in this case, you have the entire family, like cousins, aunts, uncles, everything like that, and that makes sense for a wedding, but not for college, fair. And so it's not really funny because it doesn't feel even a little bit believable. It's not a heightened sense of reality. It's just ridiculous, and it's not funny. And then they also take things that were really funny in the original film, and they just run them into the ground. Like, for instance, there's a really funny joke in the original film where the aunt, I think her name is Vula, she tells this story about this mole that she had on her face. It's really funny. It's really awkward. There's 3 different times in this movie where she has an awkward body story, whatever. And it just feels like a repeat of the original, and it's just not funny. It's more just sort of awkward, because when you don't have time to develop characters, it just feels kind of awkward more than funny. I was just so bummed out, and I just sat there and I was getting more and more upset and more angry because I didn't like what they were doing to this thing that I love, and I was just so frustrated. And the other thing that really surprised me is Nia Vardalos, who I thought was so good in the original and so relatable, and so she was flat and wooden and really amateurish in her line reading. She was not a good actress, and nobody else is really given the chance to really act, because, like, there's, for instance, another great example of how fractured this movie is there's a whole storyline where the Joey Fatone character is gay, but he doesn't want to tell the family. But this is the way they set it up. They're like moving furniture and stuff, like getting ready for something, and all of a sudden there's this man there that you've never seen before, ever. He's just like moving furniture and stuff, and somebody makes some comment about hiding or whatever, and he says, well, at least they're not hiding who they are. This is somebody we literally have never, he might as well have just been an extra. And I'm like, where did that come from? And then it's like, oh, okay. Not that that's a problem. That's perfectly fine story plot, but it just came out of nowhere. And you know, they just keep piling on the subplots, and none of them are funny, and all of them are kind of over the top and awkward and trying to get sentiment and stuff that's not earned because we don't care about the characters because it's so fractured. And it was just so frustrating. I was so sad. I almost walked out. It made me so angry what they were doing to something that I loved. And I know that in theory, like, this is not a worse movie than Norm of the North. I know that that is worse, but this disappointed me so much more because, again, I loved the original so much. So yeah, for me, this is an F. I hated it, and I just felt like it was false and phony and tired and fractured and everything else. So it was really bad. Pretty much every way. Lainie Kazan squeezes out a couple funny jokes, but that's about it, unfortunately. So I really don't recommend seeing A Big Fat Greek Wedding 2, but a lot of other people in my Facebook group really liked it. So comedy is really subjective. What are you going to do? But that's just my feeling. You know, I always tell you like I see it. So anyway, I was really bummed out about this one. So I will talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.